I'm Kristen Grippo, the Community Engagement Director for Berkshire Art Center, and I'd like to welcome you to this virtual artist talk with Kelly Potter. Berkshire Art Center is a nonprofit community art school with locations in Stockbridge and Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Our mission is to provide hands-on experiences in the visual arts for all ages, all incomes, and all skill levels. We offer studio-based art programs in multiple disciplines year-round, and our studios end online. You can find our class offerings and upcoming artist talks on our website at berkshireartcenter.org. A couple of housekeeping notes. Please familiarize yourself with your mute button and ensure that you use it while Kelly is presenting and when you have background noise particularly. There will be a Q&A following Kelly's presentation. You're welcome to add questions as they come up using the chat feature, and once we open for questions, we'll use a combination of the chat and live questions. To ask a question during the live Q&A, please use the raise hand button, which you can find under the more or when clicking participants at the bottom of the screen. You can also ask to be called on in the chat or type your question in to have it read aloud. Lastly, well, I've said many times we're recording this session. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Kelly Potter. Kelly received her undergraduate BFA degree in studio arts at the University of Massachusetts Amherst with a focus in painting and sculpture. Since graduating in 2018, Potter has worked for multiple artists from oil painters, ceramicists, and potters to model makers and sculptors. Kelly is currently working from her studio in East Hampton, Mass. Her recent body of work utilizes wood-fired ceramic relief sculpture, oil painting, and motion-activated trail camera installation. Potter's work investigates themes of what we understand to be wild, looking at a dialogue between man and nature, the misfits and the misunderstood, the tamed and the untamed. Many of us were fortunate enough to be present for her opening this past Saturday at the Morris Studio at Chesterwood, the historic home of Daniel Chester French. I'm personally thrilled to hear all that Kelly has to say about the work she created during her residency there. So without further ado, take it away, Kelly.
Thanks everyone who's here for my artist talk. I'm just gonna, I guess we'll go through these slides and I'll basically cover I think the beginning of the slides show some of the finished work. It's a combination between ceramic relief, all of it's wood-fired, and then some plaster relief. And in addition to that, I have some video installation pieces and some forest sculpture installations too. So yeah, this page kind of shows, like, to the left there's two pieces that were made in the wood kiln, and there's ceramic relief. Those are glazed and wood fired. And then the middle piece is a plaster relief. And then the one to the right is one of the forest sculptures that I have. It's actually still hanging on the Chesterwood grounds on the Woodland Walk. And yeah, so next slide. So, oh yeah, and I also have an oil painting too. So yeah, here's 3 photos of some of the stuff that I finished. And they're all pretty different from each other, like, but they kind of follow similar themes, and I'll get into that later on in the talk. But overall, the assignment as resident artist at Chesterwood was to kind of just take in the grounds and to kind of respond to the grounds and be inspired by what I see at the grounds. And so a lot of the themes kind of came from Daniel Chester French's work itself, and then I also looked at the grounds in general, like the oil paintings based on, it's a literal picture of Daniel Chester French's studio. And the piece to the left with the bird and the dog, that's kind of 2 emblem pieces that I made based on wildlife that I saw on the grounds. So a lot of the wildlife was bears, which I wasn't expecting, but that kind of became like the major theme because of some video work that I got during my time there. And then, so I kind of did like a dog / wolf / bear creature because I kind of like to fuse animals together. And then the other emblem creature was a bird, and that's just, I guess Daniel Chester French was like a huge birder, and he just loved the birds that he saw on the grounds. And yeah, so I did those 2 things. But you can go to the next slide. So here's how they look glazed. I worked in 3 different wood kilns, but I'll get into that later. And yeah, they come out a little bit different from each other. Yep, next slide. And these are the 2 pieces that were directly responding to Daniel Chester French's work. It was my first time using plaster, which was really fun. I got really inspired looking at his work in the studio. A lot of it was plaster. So I kind of had the idea. I work from press molds that I make out of a 2-part rubber. So doing that, I can also cast the same piece in plaster. So everything is initially sculpted and modeled out of clay, and then I cast it in plaster later, or I press mold it with paper clay that I fire in a wood kiln. But talking about these 2 pieces, the one on the left, well, the one that Daniel Chester French did, which is the angel and the woman, that one's titled Immortal Love. And I just felt really inspired by that piece because of it's like beautiful, and I like that it had like 2 different meanings involved in the piece based on the angle that you look at it. So I kind of wanted to use it as like a way to do a study of his people, and sorry, I forget to breathe sometimes when I talk. I wanted to do like an academic study of Daniel Chester French's work, so I basically took photos of the 2 figures in the Immortal Love piece, and I transposed that into a ceramic relief sculpture, and then casted it in plaster. And I kind of just made it more of a playful contemporary take on it, instead of it feeling like the more passion and intensity that French does. I did more of a gentle, like little snuggly pose. And then the piece to the right is Cetus, which is in response to one of his most famous pieces, Andromeda, which I think was the last piece he made before he passed. Or yeah, I think it was like his last major project, and got really into the mythological tale that it's based on. And it's basically Andromeda is scorned for her beauty, and she's changed to a rock by her parents to be killed by a giant sea monster. And then later on, Perseus comes in with Medusa's head and kills the sea monster named Cetus. So I've always just been interested in creatures and the characters in fairy tales and stories and folklore that are perceived as evil or beasts, and I kind of like to change that perspective a little bit and paint them as like playful or vulnerable, but also still kind of scary. So that was my take on Cetus the sea monster. Okay, next ad. So these are just some preliminary studies of how I got into those concepts and ideas, and just working with composition. The top left is just like a Google search of Cetus. And then those are just the drawings in my sketchbook, and then Procreate iPad drawings. That was a piece. I don't think French particularly sculpted that. I'm not entirely sure. The fish creature, I'm not totally sure who did it. I'm not sure if it's the Petrelli brothers, but I think so. And then on the top right, those are some photos that are in French's studio on the Chesterwood grounds. One of them actually shows his inspiration for Immortal Love, which was a geyser, like the smoke or the steam coming out of the geyser made that composition. And I just found that really interesting that he used nature specifically to inspire his composition. And yeah, that's another reason I kind of got fascinated by that piece. The photo on the bottom really tied in with the relief I did for Immortal Love. Just I kind of use that as like inspiration to sculpt their profiles. And yeah, and then the middle piece was a drawing of something I was gonna do, but then I didn't end up using it, but I thought it might be interesting to include. And yeah, next slide. So, this is kind of showing the beginning stages of after I draw a piece out, I'll kind of like tweak it on Photoshop and make sure I like the composition. And then I'll literally set up my iPad with the drawing or a notebook with the drawing. I'll set it up next to an easel and I'll just start sculpting with clay. This piece is like the biggest piece I've ever done. I had to like shrink it down as much as possible because it barely fit in the kiln. But yeah, I just worked with it up on that easel like that, and I used a big spatula and just carved away at it and smushed the clay around. Yeah, the themes I used: appears threatening but also wounded, spiraling motion, sense of change, fear, swirling emotion, guard up, human-like hands in contrast with large teeth. Yeah, so generally like in my art concepts, I feel like the beasts that I work with typically like I want to show them looking a little wounded and kind of representing like a bigger emotion, kind of like a cloud of emotion that's swirling. I'm not entirely sure why I'm attracted to that concept, but it tends to just be something that always ties into my work. And the human hands, I feel like, add to the sea monster being a little bit more relatable, kind of more human and not necessarily beast. So, and I think I've seen other ceramic artists do similar things with that. So I definitely got inspired by some other artists. And yeah, the last photo is kind of as finished as you can see before I made the mold. But yeah, next slide. And yeah, this is the same thing, modeling immortal love in clay. I kind of said everything already about it, but yeah, that's what it looked like when I was working on it. I started with one of the portraits and then added in the other. That one took a lot longer than I thought, but yeah. Um, yeah, I already kind of said all of that stuff. And yeah, the last one is kind of just a picture of me working in the studio. But yeah, you can go to the next slide. And this is some shots of preliminary drawings and sculpting the emblem critters. One of them, the bird I sculpted on a log in a pond. Like I did it in one day and I didn't have a spray bottle, so I dumped it in the water. But it was really cute. I was just watching dragonflies like hunting and little fish jumping the whole day. I think it helped me work better. It was also so hot that day. My studio doesn't have air conditioning, so it was really nice to just like lay by the water all day. And I'll kind of do that sometimes. I'll make little clay picnics. I have like this little easel that people use for plein air, and I stick a wad of clay in it with my tools, and I'll just walk it to like a river. And yeah, it's kind of a nice way to work sometimes. And yeah, I already kind of talked about that too. I picked those particular subjects because they're just the ones that I saw most often on the grounds. And yeah, you can move to the next slide.
Mm.
So this is how I make the mold. So you've seen everything in its model phase. And once I get it as finished as possible, I use this particular product is a half and half 2-part rubber. I think I have it right there. Yeah, it's urethane rubber and it's called Rioflex 40. So there's a Rioflex. The Rioflex is basically the kind of rubber, and 40 is the level of hardness. So you can get rubber that's softer or less hard, but 40 seemed to be the perfect hardness for pressing clay into to still capture the detail without it squishing out the mold too much, if that makes sense. To the left, I basically you hot glue, like you cut out cardboard strips that are taller than your piece, than the thickness of your piece. And then you hot glue it all around the perimeter. And then you have to really like squish clay on both the inside and the outside and every crack to make sure that you don't lose any rubber because it's gonna want to leak. And then I kind of just guessed the weight, but there's like equation formulas you can look up to know exactly how much rubber to mix so that you don't use too much or too little. And yeah, so you pour it, let it to rest overnight, and then this is the product that you end up with. And I haven't had any rip or break. I think they're pretty versatile. They last a long time. So yeah, that's a sweaty picture of me getting to see this one out. It was really hot. Okay, next slide. So that's how they look when they come out. There's a lot of, it obviously catches the whole piece. There is still a lot of finishing and like retouching to do, but it's kind of fun to do that at the same time. So yeah, there's definitely like a lot of pros to having molds for your work. You can make lots of pieces with it, but at the same time, there's a lot of time to do retouching and smoothing out the clay and kind of refinishing those lines. And the rubber is really expensive. Just for the cetus sculpture, that was $200 just for the rubber, and the clay was like $100. But I think it's definitely worth it because if you're working in ceramics or with glazes and unpredictable kiln firings, I find it just to be like a really nice blanket or like a way to make sure that if something explodes or breaks, you didn't lose all that time that you put into initially modeling your piece, which I actually had a cetus sculpture break, so I was really glad that I had two of them. And yeah, so next slide. Oh, so this was, I had the molds made and I was like, ooh, yay, I can try casting them in plaster. So that was really fun, really messy, but they came out great. They also have some like finishing to do afterwards, but it involved just like sanding and I had some like bubbles that I just filled in with some paint, but yeah, they came out pretty good. So that was fun. Next slide. So these particular pieces, I wanted to, I felt like they were relevant to Chesterwood because of the bears, but I felt like I needed to kind of make them a little bit more relevant. I also designed that piece in particular to explore pattern because I've been working for this artist, Lee Hutt, and we've been doing a lot of glaze work together, and I was feeling super inspired by the stuff that we were doing together. And she let me use her glazes, which was amazing. So I basically came up with the idea to use Chesterwood's wallpaper, which they had one main wallpaper in the downstairs like main entrance area. The actual residence is closed right now, so I used photos that we found in the archives as reference, and that worked out pretty great. And I zoomed in on the wallpaper photos, and I found some compositions that were interesting to me, and I set up a Procreate photo and kind of like moved it around my piece until it made an interesting composition. And I picked 3 of them out of like 5 that I liked. And then I just went ahead and I used underglazes. Most of them were Amico brand. And it's a bit of guessing because you're not sure how it's going to come out in the firing, and it definitely did change a lot. I think I have a photo somewhere of what it looked like before it got fired. Maybe that's the next slide, I'm not sure, but yeah, it's like definitely some guesswork, and I was like, I hope it comes out good. And then I fired it in Michael McCarthy's kiln in Goshen, and they're probably like one of the most exciting pieces I had in there, so I was really happy with how they came out. And yeah, just underglazes. The rest was, the shininess was just it just came up from like the salt and the wood ash and the wood firing. So yeah. Next slide. Oh yeah, here it is. So that's what they looked like when I was glazing them, like very matte, kind of fuzzy looking, a lot brighter. And when you're working with underglazes, you kind of have to expect that it's gonna get like a few shades darker. So I kind of tried to keep it as light as I could. And yeah, I think one of them with like the vines and stuff on it, I ended up not using because it came out bad. But yeah, and those are the birds too. So next slide. Yeah, that's a photo of the kiln that they were put in, and just some photos of what they looked like when they just came out. And yeah, it's a really wonderful kiln. It looks small, but you can fit so much in there. So it's always a wonderful experience firing with these guys. It's pretty much like an overnight firing, but typically we finish firing it by, I think the last couple of times it was like we fired from Michael started it at like 5 a.m. and then we finished firing it at about like 10 or 11 p.m. So then it sits for a few days in reduction and then you pull it out like next week. And yeah, that's what you get. Next slide. Oh, oops. I was gonna add another photo in this, but I forgot. So this was the other kiln that I fired in, which was with Berkshire Art Center. They have a soda firing kiln and a reduction gas kiln. So I had one in each. The reduction kiln, my cetus exploded or he cracked, and I'm not sure why, but maybe some way that I rolled out the slabs, it wasn't particularly strong enough. I might have had some seam that like warped and burst out in that high temperature. But luckily I had another one and it was my first soda firing, so that was super exciting. I just played around with some underglazes and used one of their finish glazes. I forget what one it was, like yellow salt, I think. But yeah, super happy with how it came out. It's really fun. Thanks, guys. And yeah, so next slide. This was the other kiln that I fired in at Joy Brown's studio in Kent, Connecticut. I did an overnight shift at this firing, and this one's just really beautiful. It's like I think it goes on for, is it a 14-day firing? I'm kind of spacing on it right now, but it's major like clay body reduction stuff. Most of the work that goes in there is unglazed, so everything you see, all that variation and all those patterns is straight up just wood ash and clay reduction. So the one on the bottom right, it has like a spot on it. That's an example of where another piece was stacked on top of that piece. So there's a big wad stuck right on the top of that heron and another piece put on top of it, and it left that mark where it didn't. So basically the circle is where the piece didn't get as much wood ash, if that gives an example. Oh, and the heron above that one, it has some like crazy wood, like that one was in the front of the kiln, so it got some really crazy ash buildup, and it literally made like an ashy glaze, so it became really shiny and blue in those specific areas. So those kinds of things are just so exciting to me. But yeah, next slide. And yeah, so now I'm gonna get into the other thing I did, which was trail camera installations and kind of wood and fabric sculpture. The themes involved in these are the first pieces I made, and I initially wanted to get some animal activity with them, but I installed them both like right on the grounds on the woodland walk, so I actually didn't get any videos of animals on that with these guys. But in general, the themes are childhood fort making, and I was kind of thinking about how close my childhood home was to the Chesterwood grounds, and how much time I spent playing in the woods as a kid. And I used driftwood that I got out of the Green River, and the fabric, I don't even remember where I got it, but I thrifted it from somewhere at some point. And yeah, just like cute little fort building pieces. Yeah, you can do the next slide. And then this was the other one that I worked on. So I was told there was like a Ledges Trail, or I had hiked up to the Ledges Trail before, but once you get to the top at the peak, the mountain ridge kind of goes way back. You can walk along this like heavily trafficked animal trail that goes down the ridge, and who knows how far into the woods. I followed it pretty far to kind of explore different locations for my forest installs, and I initially brought this bed sheet that I got from Goodwill, and I found an interesting spot where there was a lot of like deer poop and animal activity, and the path was just so, you could tell it was heavily used by different animals. So I set up, what I do is I set up a motion activated trail camera, which typically is used by hunters, but I like to use it just to look at animals in the area and see how they interact with stuff that I leave in the woods. Some previous things that I've done is I've sculpted with like bittersweet vine in the woods, and I've seen a lot of like deer come up to it and they stick their heads in the pieces. So this time I brought a bed sheet and I set it up there, and I was like, what's gonna check it out? And like one of the first critters that looked at it was this baby bear, and it was just really sweet how he opened it like a curtain and then rubbed himself all over it and tore it down. And then a couple of days later, he came back with his mama, and the two of them just like played with the bed sheet together and made this really beautiful video. So I played along with that and left that one up multiple times. And yeah, next slide. So after like I think like a month of playing with the bed sheet one, I made these 3 different pieces based on like furniture that I saw in the Chesterwood residence. And one of them was this like wacky swirly chair that I was really into. And then another one is an umbrella holder. And then I did a window with curtains to add to the composition. And yeah, nothing looked at it for a long time. And then a couple weeks later, this bear found it and he just like loved it. He came back 3 other times, I think, 2 or 3 other times, and basically would just like grab the piece, lift it up in the air, roll on the ground, and snuggle up with it. And yeah, there were multiple times of me just resetting up the composition and then him coming back like a couple of days later and tearing it down again. So I kind of feel like I developed a little relationship with this guy, like just back and forth, helping him sell toys and him tearing them back down again. But yeah, and yeah, I don't remember what else I have on here, but we can check what's on the next slide. Oh yeah, the oil. I keep forgetting about the oil painting. So yeah, once I finished all of my sculptural pieces, I kind of just felt like doing a painting. I had taken some photos during my time at Chesterwood, and being on the grounds in general is just so beautiful. And checking the trail camera videos throughout like the 3 months that I was working there, I just felt like I got this really interesting perspective of the grounds through the woods, like me walking on the trails and then peeking out at the residence. And this was one of the pictures I got, looking at like the Daniel Chester French's studio through the woods. And I just loved how the leaves made that composition, and how the glowing spackle was like lit up in that particular lighting. And then I just added the pink sky later because that's a thing I like to do. And yeah, so you can kind of see the progress of it developing over time. Oh, next slide. And yeah, so that's all the pieces. And then I didn't actually initially have this in my slideshow, but I didn't realize how interesting like installing the show was gonna be. I never worked with video before, So it was my first time using projectors, and that was just I loved it. Like the way you can project the video onto a wall, you can really play with the composition or play around with objects in front of it or framing it like a TV screen. So yeah, I kind of played around with that, and then I played around with hanging some pieces from the ceiling, and also with the ceramic relief. It was kind of a lot of making like a composition with all the pieces together. So all the birds that I have, I don't even remember how many I made, like 10 or something. It was a lot of fun to kind of like place them in different ways to kind of guide your eye from like, oh, a sculpture into a painting, and then floating into one of the dog emblems, and then seeing Cetus and adding another little emblem underneath Cetus. So yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I'm really happy with how like the overall composition of the space worked. It was a beautiful space that they gave me for my show, so I'm super grateful for that. And yeah, overall it was a really wonderful experience. And I think that might be it. But yeah, I guess to finalize my talk, I would like to say how grateful I am for you guys having me. Berkshire Art Center has been so wonderful to me, and you guys have become my good friends. I'm really grateful for you guys like trusting me with this residency and with the whole process, and getting to meet everyone in the ceramic room was really great, and using the kiln, and yeah, it's just been lovely. And thank you, Chesterwood, as well. It's been so great to get to know everybody. You've all been so sweet. And yeah, I think question time. Oh wait, I haven't been looking at the chat. Yeah. Aw. Aw, thanks, guys. Yeah, it was so much fun. I'm glad that it was such a long residency too, because I could really like immerse myself with everybody, especially working from my studio in East Hampton and commuting back and forth. I feel like it worked out so perfectly to be able to like see both places, and yeah, it was so wonderful. So yeah, if anyone has any questions.
And yeah, you can feel free to type them in the chat or just reach out. Thank Kate. Well, it looked like Lucy was gonna go ahead.
What?
Yeah, I have a question.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, I was at your show last week, and it was just so awesome to see what you've done in your residency. One of the questions that I had was, so after you took the pieces like out of the mold, you kind of mentioned that it was a fun process to like it was equally as fun to kind of finish them as it was to kind of like make the mold and all the other steps. So my question to you was like, I know from how you glaze them, they had different characteristics, but did you also like were you approaching taking pieces out of the mold so that they were exactly similar to one another from like a clay rebuild perspective, or were you also looking to kind of lean into some of the differences for each piece that you made?
Yeah, so actually, I mean, this time around, I kind of did it like pretty quickly with the time crunch of getting it ready for the firing. So I kind of just like did the exact copy and then let it dry overnight. But I kind of love that as a part of the press mold process, because sometimes it'll just do something wacky to your piece. Like there's always going to be a little bit of an undercut in the mold, even with like the rubber press mold, and it might alter it slightly. And sometimes that like leads to making the piece better than I had sculpted it. Like one example is I used to do a lot of frog sculptures, and I have like a frog mold, and one time the mold opened, the frog's mouth was like closed and kind of derpy, and the mold had like opened its mouth a little bit just in the front, and it gave it like the cutest little, it looked like it's like the front of its tongue was just sticking out a little bit. And I was like, oh my God, I love that. So ever since that happened, I kind of like would go in with a tool and kind of recreate that. So yeah, in a way, it definitely, like, sometimes I won't necessarily alter it too much, but if it does happen and it's exciting, then I definitely go with that. And also, like, sometimes you can do it really quickly and sloppily just to get them to look different on purpose. And I think that is also kind of good because you don't always want like exact copies of the same thing. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you guys for coming.
That's super. I like that frog story a lot, and I have so much to say. I was like taking notes. Uh, well, I think it's more of like a comment and then a question, but I appreciate how you. So you had the Chesterwood as the backdrop, and then in addition to that, it seems that you're pulling like you're pulling from many different aspects of your universe, which is, you know, from the work you're doing with other artists, and then and additionally kind of like working from a subconscious place too, like that. It seems that you're being guided by kind of some magical things that are coming into the picture, that are leading you to create in that way. That's what I'm putting together from your pieces, and I loved how all the way to the end to the installation that was an essential part of the whole thing. That you found a place for the projections, and again, I feel so grateful that we got to be there. Some of us who were there physically. And my only question is, what happened to those birds? They didn't make it into the final show. The heron, or there's one behind you, I think.
Oh, that one broke. Yeah. So I was gonna put it in, but it actually its tail broke off. I don't know if you can see. And like, I don't know. I could still like sell it, but it felt a little weird to put in like a broken piece. And yeah, I think this was the only one that didn't make it in. Oh, there were like two more, and it was because I wanted to keep them for myself.
And I'll just share in the chat. Michael Lynch, who's the interim director at Chesterwood, said you attracted about 75 people to your opening. How did you do that?
Oh my God! Wait, did 75 people come?
Apparently,
is that actually how many people came?
We can ask Michael, but I mean,
did so much?
There were a lot.
Crazy. Oh my God! Yeah, I mean, I was like, woo! Like, I was so distracted because so many people I loved showed up from like who I hadn't seen or lived really far away. So I don't think I noticed how many people were there. But I mean, yeah, I guess I'm always working so many different jobs, and I'm always like, yeah, as an artist, like I work only art jobs, but it means I have to kind of work multiple jobs all the time. So like I had a lot of people that I've worked for come and from like different locations, like working with the wood kilns in Connecticut, and then all the art jobs I've done out in the Northampton area. And then I also go to the Berkshires a lot to see family. So maybe that's just like all the clusters of all the different people coming, and I don't know who else heard about it, but that's really cool. Yeah, thanks everyone who came. I'm so appreciative of that.
Does anybody have any more questions before we finish up tonight?
I have at least one more. So you mentioned that for your final installation that using projectors and incorporating video was something new for you. Do you think that like as you move, you know, forward and whatever is next for you, that might be something you would play with in what you create?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I'm so excited by that. Like because I've been doing video work since, well, I've always recorded silly videos like on my phone, and I've made like some music videos for friends before. But knowing how just the feeling of a projector in a gallery space was super inspiring for me, and I never like I don't know that many artists personally that do that, so I feel like I haven't actually seen a whole lot of it in person aside from like going to museums and stuff. But just working on it with my own work, it's definitely something that's like been dancing in my brain ever since I set it up for the show. So totally. And it just like it kind of resolves that because I've been doing the trail camera thing since COVID because I didn't have a studio for a while. So that was kind of my way of like still being able to make work. But I had along many years of not really knowing how it would work in a fine art contemporary gallery scene because it's just like, oh, like cool trail camera videos, but seeing it projected on the wall, like I think it makes sense. So I'm just really excited by it. I totally am gonna work with that more.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, it was really cool to see how you kind of station. I think you had some pieces set on, I'm not an artist, so I don't know what the blocky things are called. A pedestal. You had some things set up on a pedestal in front of one of your videos that you were playing. And that was pretty cool. And it was also cool to see kind of how you filled the space with the piece that you created with like the driftwood and the fabric that you thrifted. Because when you were in different spots of the space, you could kind of see how everything was interacting in a different way. It was pretty cool. It was really awesome.
Yeah, I was so excited by that because like everything, all the pieces before the show, like I hadn't even taken out half of the ceramic pieces until Sunday, like before the show was happening. So everything that was going in that space was in multiple different locations, and I wasn't sure how it was going to come together. So like once that piece was in the woods, and then everything else was like elsewhere, and then bringing that into the fabric piece into the gallery space was just exciting for exactly what you just said, like seeing how it interacts with everything else. And yeah, I think I'm also really inspired by seeing pieces hanging from the ceiling because you can just see how they like might move subtly. So yeah, there was a lot of discoveries happening. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, well, kudos. I mean, considering that you had to bring it from different spaces together, and that I think like how it got executed was it was so great as like a spectator to be a part of. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's awesome to hear. Oh, I think I saw something in the chat. Oh yes. So one of the pieces I left in the woods. Oh, it's getting dark in my studio. There's the two-piece that we saw on the first slide. I thought about bringing that into this space, but a part of me, I want to like, because part of the concept for those pieces is if I don't get any animal interaction, it still kind of has some meaning because in a sense, I just love watching like how the piece evolves and changes with nature, like watching videos of the wind blowing it around or like the rain pouring on it. So I left one of the pieces out on the Chesterwood grounds on the Woodland Walk. If any of you guys haven't, if you want to check it out, if you haven't seen it yet, it's still there. If you go on the Woodland Walk and go all the way to the back, there's like this little meadow in the woods, and it's just to the right of that meadow. I left it there because I'm just really excited to see how it looks with the fall foliage. And yeah, I just want to see what the forest does to it for another month. So that's kind of like an exciting other little thing going on. Thanks for bringing that up too. Yeah, that was like, I keep forgetting that there's still things in the woods. I also have the bear sculpture still up. I might like, I don't know, I might ask to see if I can like do another one. I think like while the show's still up for another month, there might be a whole nother exciting interaction going on. So I'll see about doing that too.
I noticed in person in the show, your piece that was hanging at the show that's inspired by the tree forts, the white fabric of it kind of had fern pattern on it. And I was wondering if that's something that you created intentionally or it was just a product of it being out in nature.
Yeah, that was totally like all of it being in nature. And I kind of like that. So I didn't have that like planned out initially, but I knew it was going to happen. And I was kind of just like, you know what, like I know this isn't entirely weatherproof, but there's something about the fort install, and like in my childhood, even now going back into like my childhood backwoods and finding like old little forts that like me and my sisters used to make and see how they aged over time. I kind of like how having those pieces out there, they're a little bit fragile and they get weathered. I like that they represent those same feelings. And yeah, ferns happened because the piece like fell off probably in the wind and I didn't notice, so I didn't pick it up in time to like keep it from getting dirty, but that's also okay. So it was like in a little fern meadow, and when I picked it up eventually after noticing that it had fallen, those ferns like had kind of stuck and plastered themselves to the wing of the piece, and I kind of liked it. I like scraped some of it off, but it definitely left an imprint, and I'm really into that.
Thank you. Yeah, it looked so intentional, like the pounded flowers.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and it also, I meant to say this. It's similar to the way the wood firings work. I think I like when like I let nature do some of the work. It's like a little collaboration, and there's some excitement. Like it leaves room for like exciting things to happen. And I always like when that's a part of like the development and the process of making the work. So it's similar. Oh, oh wait, I can't hear you. Oh no.
Yeah, sorry, I keep on asking questions. I'm noticing that a lot of your ceramic pieces are facing in the same direction. Did you do that on purpose or for like a particular reason?
No, so I did that by accident. I don't know why, but I think which was the one that I made facing the other way. I think was it the little bird? I originally drew that one facing the same way, and I was like, oh crap, I need to do one facing the other way. So yeah, I don't know why these two. I always wanted to go that way. I don't know why. But yeah, I'll try to keep it like different because I feel like it does make sense to have them like going different directions. That's funny that you noticed that.
Yeah, you don't have to. I mean, I thought it was kind of like it could have. I was wondering if it was like a circular, like I don't know, circular kind of relationship between your pieces. That could have been. It can be whatever you want. I just noticed it since
Yeah.
it was on the wall behind you.
And I also noticed I always have their faces going up. I don't know why I like doing that, but it feels important for some reason. That's one of those things where it's like it's definitely a concept or theme that I'm like playing with, but I honestly don't know what it is yet. So I'll just keep doing it till it hits my brain.
Well, someday people will study your work, and then they'll notice that as well, and they'll make some conclusions about maybe
Yeah,
or something like that. So
they'll give me the answers.
I think that's where, when I mentioned the subconscious, like that's what I feel like. It seems like you're working with some like archetypical things, like whether or not Like it seems like you are aware, and then there are these like other depths that are you're kind of like even with the sadists and all of that kind of mythological themes, you know. They this one, the dog feels really like I would see it in like a Roman um, you know, architecture. So there's like some older vibes.
Yeah, I love like all the medieval manuscript art, like something is just I like how it's kind of creepy and raw and yeah, I don't really know fully how to explain it, but yeah, maybe the head tilt thing is a little bit of like screaming out and feeling a little bit grotesque in a way. Um, or maybe yeah, there might be some themes with that in older ancient artworks that I've been subconsciously seeing, like you're saying, totally.
Well, we're pretty much at the 7 o'clock mark. If anybody has any other questions or comments, um, please share them. This has been a joy to host and to get to know you, Kelly. We're so happy to have had you. Yeah, we hope it's a continued relationship. We'd love to have you come teach with us, and for everyone who's present or watching, because this will be up on our YouTube, the Berkshire Art Center YouTube channel. Kelly's show is going to be up for the next while. And you can go see it at Chesterwood at the Morris Gallery. Yeah, and please keep an eye out for her. She's doing great things up through the end of October. Thank you. Great.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. It's
Thanks,
been
Kelly.
such a pleasure. Or sorry, what?
Just thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great night, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for trusting me and giving me the wonderful opportunity. It's been so amazing. Thanks, guys. Yay!
Thank you. Good night, everyone.